Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Teena Jha. You're watching Perspective, wherein today we are going to discuss the global tech layoffs. In just the past month, there have been nearly 50,000 job cuts across the technology sector. A string of companies, including global tech giants, have been slashing jobs one after the other. Google, owned by parent company Alphabet, has announced it is going to lay off 12,000 people. Microsoft is cutting about 10,000 jobs, which is almost 5% of its workforce. Amazon plans to lay off more than 18,000 employees, primarily in its human resources and stores divisions. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, laid off 11,000 people, which is about 13% of its workforce, while Twitter has let go about 7,500 of its employees since the social media platform was acquired by Elon Musk. As a result of the massive layoffs, thousands of Indian IT professionals in the US are without jobs, now struggling to find new employment within the stipulated period under their work visas, following the termination of their employment to stay in the country. As per reports, nearly 2 lakh IT professionals have been laid off since November last year. A significant 30 to 40% of them are Indians. So why are the layoffs happening? What are the implications on those who have been hit hard by these layoffs? What does it mean for the global digital business? All this and much more in perspective today with 3 distinguished panelists joining us on the program. Delighted to have with us Mr. Khande. He is Director, Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, FIIDS, USA. He's also the President, Global Indian Technology Professionals Association. Mr. Khande, thank you for your time and welcome to Sansad TV. We also have with us Mr. Harpreet Singh Saluja, Founder, President, Nascent Information Technology Employees Senate. Mr. Saluja, delighted to have you on the program as well. And Ambassador Jitendra Nath Mishra. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on this program. Mr. Khande, first to put things into context and understand in the first place, why are these layoffs happening? Why are these global tech giants indulged in a massive firing spree, which is impacting thousands of Indians in the US?
As most of the giants' leadership told, that there are these macroeconomic concerns, particularly because of the inflation. There is upcoming fears of recession, slowdown. It's going to impact the economy. For last few years, during the COVID time, the digital economy boomed and there were much hiring. However, this drastic and immediate slowdown is impacting their businesses. So all these companies are tightening their belts. We prepared to tackle this recession and slowdowns.
Ambassador, how is it impacting the Indians? What we hear is of the 2 lakh people who've lost their jobs in the country in the last 3 to 4 months, about 40% of them are Indian IT professionals, and especially those who are there on H-1B visas. So how are they going to be impacted? How difficult is the current scenario for them?
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. Yes, it's going to be very difficult at a personal level for themselves and their families, no doubt. Just to give some more factual perspective, 400,000 H-1B visas have been granted by the Americans, all total. Now, 75% of that is Indian, according to 2021 data. Now, you are saying 30 to 40% have been laid off, are Indians of those. Now, the total workforce of Indians out of the total in the US is 75%. So potentially it could get much worse.
Yes.
So far it hasn't, but it could. Now, the question is, obviously there is a humanitarian problem, and there is also a problem in the domestic politics of India, because there will be constituencies on behalf of these families, these groups, people affected. They are Indian citizens. Now, what are we going to do about it? That is a big question. And I will say that the government of India will have to tread very carefully on this, because at the end of the day, this is an issue of sovereignty. But we cannot just brush this issue under the carpet, because not because of domestic politics alone in India, but also because of our overall ties with the US.
Right.
If there is a full spectrum relationship, this issue of movement of people unfettered on both sides has to be addressed. I'll stop here I'll have more to say
Sure.
on this
I'll
later.
come back to you, Ambassador, to understand what really can the government of India do in this matter. But before I come across to you, Mr. Saluja, one question from Mr. Khan. It's a related question on the implication that the current scenario is having on the Indians who've been impacted. Mr. Khan, help us and our viewers give a sense of, what is the stipulated period under which those who are holding the H-1B visas have to look for another employment. And the fact now that it's a series of layoffs. All of the companies, big or small, are actually firing employees. So within that stipulated period of time, how difficult will it be for those who've been impacted to actually find new jobs?
Yeah, actually, this is a massive, brutal, and sudden. Started with October and particularly last 3 months, 3 weeks. There has been 73,000 layoffs in overall in USA, and most of them in Silicon Valley, then Seattle, those which are the tech hub, because four giants are mostly situated either in Silicon Valley, Seattle. They are the major concentration. Now, these companies, once they notify USCIS, that is the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Department, that's the time the grace period start. So typically there are 60 days of grace period during which they need to either find another employer or sponsor for the H-1B. Once they get out of the status, then immediately within the 10 days, they would have to leave the country. So generally, when the smaller companies lays off, it can give 15 days or 30 days of notice, or sometimes even in case of the firing, they do the immediate notification to the USCIS. In this particular case, these large corporations, they are little bit lenient, and they are keeping many of most of the employees for 1 month to 3 months of the period where they are still on the payroll. They cannot work, but they have the package terms similar to that, and then the grace period will start. So this is the overall scenario. The whole impact on the H-1B and their families it's a disruption. Their education of the children, the families, etc., they will be uprooted from here if they needed to go outside.
You're right.
Though this period is a longer period, the problem with the overall cascade effect of this slowdown, because once the large companies lays off, there are all the other small, medium companies, they start either freezing, pausing, and look around at what's happening. Even though they have the openings, suddenly they will pausing the hiring itself. So that would create a problem for these laid off people to look forward or look around and get the jobs. So that is the difficulty, not just the grace period. The USCIS gave 2 months of grace period, and then we are asking for extension of that grace period because this is a unprecedented time during which it will be difficult to find out the jobs.
Very difficult times for those, especially those who have families. And as you said, it has caused disruptions. So how the government of India, how the Indian community in the US can, help these families sail out through this difficult period. What your organization is doing is something that I'll also want you to discuss with our viewers. I'll come back to that in just a bit. Let me bring in Mr. Saluja into the discussion also. Mr. Saluja, the fact is, it could be fear of a probable recession. All of us are aware of the global economic slowdown. But what about the hiring spree that all of these companies went on during the COVID pandemic? Is it also one of the biggest factors that is now, that has begun to show its aftermath? The fact that the last 2 years, these companies have hired beyond capacity, and now in the wake of a global economic slowdown, in the face of a recession, they are reassessing and optimizing their manpower. Could that also be a factor?
First of all, thanks, Teena Ji, for inviting me to your show. And absolutely correctly, you quoted. A post-pandemic era, if we say, end of 2021 or beginning of 2022, there was a huge demand of IT professionals across the world, and it was due to because the businesses which have faced unprecedented times during the pandemic era, they were very much inclined towards, digitization of their work and their businesses also, so that in future, if there are certain circumstances which are unavoidable and which are impacting their businesses, so to a certain extent, that impact can be mitigated. So that gave a rise to the demand of huge, IT professionals. And not even, not only the Indian IT companies, but the US IT companies also went ahead and hired a huge number of resources. And particularly talking about big tech companies, they were expecting that this demand will sustain for a period of an year or more than, or could be for more than a year as well. But ultimately, what happened once the businesses and the areas which were trying to digitize their businesses, when that I I'm sorry to when that the demand got subsided, then these companies felt that they have overhired and they have surplus amount of resources, and due to economic slowdown and global macroeconomic conditions, a lot of companies in US faced that their share prices went.
That's a very significant point. And what's concerning, Ambassador, is that perhaps it's also leadership failure at a level wherein all of the global tech companies could not foresee what was coming, and now the brunt of which has to be borne by professionals at mid-level, at lower rung of the organizations who've been shown the door, who've been given these pink slips. Now the question is, it's an impact not just on one or two families, but thousands of Indian families who are there in the US, who now face the uncertainty of having to come back to India. What really can the Indian government do about it? There have already been calls from political parties, from the central government to intervene and take the right steps. The question is, what are the right steps? What can the government do? Ambassador.
The right step is to deal with this with finesse, with dexterity, not to brush it under the carpet, but not to let it blow over into a crisis or a problem or even an irritant in the relationship, because simply of sovereignty issues. At the end of the day, as a practitioner, I will say that it is the right of the United States to allow people in or not allow people in for whatever reason. And we are in a Westphalian world, and India does the same, and every country does the same. However, if we are going to build a relationship of mutual trust and a much deeper partnership, it's obvious that we have to take care of each other's concerns. And the Indian government has been dealing with this issue in our conversations with the US. But again, if you look at the statement of our spokesman, when President Trump stopped the H-1B visas in 2020 after the COVID pandemic, our spokesman said, we are studying the implications of this, and it potentially affects Indian citizens who are in the US and their families, those who are working in the US. So that was a very, very fine line between criticism and not saying anything. Now, what has happened after that also is very interesting. There is a consular dialogue. In diplomacy, you have to put in the structures in place before you start a conversation. Right. So there is a consular dialogue, and also it features in the 2-and-2 ministerial conversation as happened in April 2022. And I will give just one quote. The two sides, quote unquote, continued engagement on visa issues, welcomed the December 2021 consular dialogue, and resolved to facilitate reciprocal movement of professionals, business people, skilled workers, experts, and scientific personnel. Now, that's as far as it goes. This is a very general statement, but I also find that there is no specific mention of the H-1B visa problem in any of our joint statements, at least not in the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
So therefore, we are just putting it as a general point of discussion. And ultimately, I have to say that this is talks about talks. But I'll come to that in the next round.
That's an important point, a fine balance between both governments because of the kind of relationship that we have. But Mr. Khan, the Indian community in the US, I believe, is doing a lot to help these families who've been impacted suddenly, and it's brought about a wave of uncertainty in their life. The question now is the Indian Americans there are part of, they form a significant population. There are several Indian Americans who are in positions of influence, in positions of power. Can they help these families at least get another job, maybe extend the grace period of their visas, something to bring about some kind of relief, some kind of reassurance to those who've been impacted?
So at individual levels, I don't think that that's happening or that would happen that way. It needs a institutionalize some efforts or collaborations between many organizations and individuals. So that efforts is on. As president of Global Indian Technology Professionals Association, GITPRO, we launched a job assistance program, particularly to connect job seekers with job givers, either employers or those who can refer to the jobs. For many of these tech professionals, particularly H1B, this is the first slowdown. Last whole decade, the economy was booming, the hiring was going on, and H1B holders never faced this issue. So now there are emotional trauma. There is also help needed to upskill, help needed to guidance how to find, where to find job opportunities in this turbulent time frame. So these are the aspect of the awareness, educational. There is also immigration related and the legal consequential financial related issues. So we are arranging some of the programs and also information sessions for those people who are impacted. So that's one part of it. And many organizations, we are trying to connect with entrepreneurs, startups, consulting companies, and who may have the openings but may have paused it if they can help. The second aspect of it is as part of Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, what we are trying to do is to extend this grace period because that's the key that eventually these people are talented people. They were hired at very premium prices in very competitive market, right. Very qualified people. So I don't think that job finding would have been an issue in the normal situation. However, currently it is a pause in hiring, and hopefully by Q2, Q3, it will slowly market will start recovering and the hiring will start. So we need extension in this grace period so that they can sustain and find out the right opportunity to stay employed and be legal, stay in the United States.
Right, we're hopeful.
So these are the two type of efforts that we are doing.
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Khan. We're hopeful some kind of a workable solution comes up at the earliest. But Mr. Saluja, what kind of impact do you see it having on the existing employees, on those looking to enter the IT sector? Because if these kind of trends continue, IT has been one of our strengths. And if this happens, it's going to be, nerve-wracking for those who are wanting to make a career in this sector in the future.
Yes, absolutely true. And to a certain extent, I would say that it is quite hurtful and demotivating as well, because to a certain extent, it has impacted the Indian IT companies also, and there is a slowdown in the hiring process in the Indian IT sector as well. And there are a lot of freshers and students who were in the final year of their courses, and the IT companies, when they saw that there was a huge demand of IT professionals, they went ahead and we call it a campus hiring process, and Wipro, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, a lot of companies offered a lot of more than 15 to 18,000 freshers received offer letters from these organizations in the last year. Few of the organizations are there who offered them with these letter of intents in September 2021. But till date, these the freshers or the campus hires were not even given joining date. For a period of almost 1 year, they are being waiting. Just they are awaiting their joining dates. They are waiting. So it is a kind of very demotivating phase for the industry overall, because there are a lot of talented people in India, and there are a lot of talented Indian IT professionals abroad as well. But if these situations like these are not dealt with, caution, or the government does not intervene at all, then there will be slightly more turbulent times, I believe.
We hope it's not the same, and we don't see the tech bubble bursting anytime soon in the future, because it's going to be a very precarious situation for us. But Mr. Khan, the fact that a lot of the companies are also saying that all of these workers perhaps did not meet the standards they were looking for, the right skill that they were looking for. Is there need to upskill also in this particular sector? How feasible and how relevant is that aspect that is being cited by the companies?
I think first thing that I will correct, that it will be inappropriate to say that they're not having the low quality or anything. So different companies have the different priorities, different projects, and different bars. So based on that, it's a very complex criteria they evaluate and then decide. So a person, if suitable in one company or not suitable, might not be the same thing in a different company. So there are core fundamental skills, because all of these companies are good companies, and their hiring processes are also very, very good. So I don't doubt about the quality of the talent of the people, and they would definitely be able to find out the jobs. However, when the technology professional rapidly changes, like say a few years back, AI was not there that much. Now AI is everywhere. Similarly, big data, social media, mobile tech. Decade back, these were not there. So tech professionals continuously need to reskill them. DevOps jobs or various types of jobs, are a new opportunity come, and over there they need to do the reskilling. That's one. Second is when you are in a job market, you also need to understand what are the key expectations and key practical aspect of the jobs that they need to retool themselves. So that's a second aspect of that. And the third also is that if you are not in the job market for a long time, you don't know how to present yourself, how to prepare yourself, how to highlight what are the skills that you have. And as many of them, they were in the job seekers market. At that time, they didn't have to focus on this aspect. But now the market condition has changed, so they need to prepare and position themselves. So these are the aspects. Some of the aspects, particularly learning new skills, is a long term. It takes time. But there are certain things that they definitely do the evolving, like say role change is the difficult. From say you are a software engineer to go to different, or program manager to get to product management. So those are the switching the roles. That is one type of reskilling, and another is that incremental, or the evolving from your own situation. So each individual would need to look at where they are, what are the opportunities, and what is the step that they can do to expedite their efforts to get the job.
Right.
But it's possible.
Okay, Ambassador Mishra, I'll take one last question from you. I don't know if I should be asking this question right now, but because a lot has been spoken about it, I thought I'll bring it up on this platform. What's being said is, and looking at the situation that the Indians who've been impacted in the US are, they are now in a very, very difficult situation, and they face newer challenges that within a stipulated period of time, they have to find a new job, which is extremely difficult given the current situation. And if that doesn't happen, they could be on their way back to India. But could that mean reverse brain drain? Could it mean that India stands to benefit because thousands of Indian IT professionals who worked in the best market, they have the best kind of experience, they come back here and contribute in the growth of the Indian IT sector? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. Crisis can become an opportunity, obviously. We were the most sanctioned country after the nuclear tests of 1974 and 1998, and we took our rocket science and space technology as well as missile capability to greater heights. So that's very much possible. But I would like to come to what I call mutual dependencies, if I may, in interstate ties. That's the point I could not complete in the last round. It's very good that India has put this issue in the structure of the dialogue, like the 2+2, as I mentioned. It's an agenda point, but that's not enough. What you have to do is to drive a hard bargain based on not just on a vague statement, but on binding commitments. We have negotiated, we have a roadmap, we have negotiated the migration and mobility partnership in the virtual summit between our two prime ministers with the UK. 3,000 Indian skilled professionals can go to the UK every year without labor market tax, but there is always a quid pro quo. We have to take back undocumented, what the UK calls illegal Indians. So something like that could be worked out. It could be binding. Of course, we are still bickering with the UK on the numbers. And both sides are going slow. And it is also linked to the FTA negotiations. So we have to tell our American friends, look, there are mutual dependencies.
Right.
What are the mutual dependencies between the US and India? India has cards because the UK IT industry, the dependence on India is a single industry dependency. You know, it was $40 to $60 billion of revenue, $50 billion in 2020 for Indian IT companies. Today, it could be $60 billion. Now, the numbers compared to China's $400 billion of merchandise trade may not look very impressive. But with China, it is multiple. It is multiple industries. In India, it is a single industry dependency that gives India many cards to work with. After all, there are $50 billion being earned by Indian companies. Now, that itself also is a leverage that the US has.
Absolutely.
Because it's a significant chunk of our trade. Our trade was 113 billion US dollars. Now, half of that is IT. Now, 1,000 US companies have set up shop in India, employing 1 million Indians. So these are leverages that the US has.
Right.
So therefore, you see, when there is a mutual leverage, that becomes the basis for a proper negotiation leading to a solution. The US interest groups, I'm afraid the Indian Americans, their interests do not align necessarily with those of our people in the IT industry. There are different interests because everybody is looking for jobs. It's not about the development of India, it's about your livelihood.
Exactly.
So that's not a solution.
A couple of points that I would like to make.
Yes, Mr. Khan, very quickly, we are running out of time.
Yeah, so one thing that this is a reverse brain drain, particularly would be helpful for this type of a talent. It might not be helpful for the new graduates that Saluja had mentioned in India.
Mm-hmm.
However, look at it last year, there are almost 50 plus unicorns born, and many of them actually caters for the market in India. So a lot of this innovation, the digitization of the India is a huge. So definitely India will have appetite to absorb this talent, and it will be a big benefit for India.
Right.
That is India's benefit point.
That's a significant point that's been discussed already. Yeah. Let's see for how long this crisis continues. We hope that the disruptions in the lives of these Indians who've been impacted does not last for that long. But in case they have to come back to India, Indian market should be ready to absorb them. Their talent should be, channelized in a way that benefits them at an individual level and the country as well in taking the Indian IT sector to newer highs. That having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.